Today, we are honored to be joined by Stephen Brady, founder and director of the Roman Catholic Faithful. Stephen has been involved in exposing corruption and abuse in the church since 2009. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, ladies. I appreciate it.
Okay. Stephen, could you tell us firstly what pushed you to start investigating the abuse and corruption in the Catholic Church?
Well, it started basically, I was a mediocre Catholic back in the early 90s. I had seven children. One was tragically killed in a car wreck, but my oldest child at the time was 14 years old. And it started with a very graphic sex education program in the public school system. The problem came into when it was pornographic in nature, but the teacher, my son's homeroom teacher that had some of the bad material, was also his religion teacher at the local parish. And several of the school board members at the public school were active in the Catholic Church as extraordinary ministers. So I went to these fellow Catholics and I said, you've got to stop this pornographic material. And they refused. So I went to the local priest. He offered no help. So I started writing every priest in the diocese to find out what was wrong. Why wouldn't they stand up for Catholicism? And that's when I started to get letters from some of the clergy telling me what the bishop was up to and what he was doing. And so it's when you find out kids are being abused and street kids even picked up, I just couldn't let it go. So it just grew from there. And the publicity started when I held my first press conference, and it just snowballed into something worldwide.
Absolutely. You spoke of the graphic sex education, and that was in 2009.
Pardon? I didn't quite catch that. It broke up just a little bit.
The graphic sex education that your son was receiving, was that in 2009?
No, that started in 1995.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Our
wow.
organization, I started this organization in 1996. We incorporated. I incorporated because people started sending me donations because they thought I was doing good work fighting the sex education.
Wow.
When they sent me donations, I had to find a way to report it as income. So I formed the corporation, and I never expected to find what I found. The time I started this in 1996, I thought if I gathered the information, I would give it to the hierarchy and they would take care of it. Little did I know how corrupt the Catholic hierarchy was at that time, and still is.
Absolutely, it still is. And a lot of, your story is very similar to mine because, I mean, I'm a cradle Catholic, but the sex education that my children were receiving in grade 7 opened my eyes to the sort of horrors of what's out there. And that sort of led me to what's going on in the church.
Well, it's all part of a game plan, because I'll tell you this, it took me years to understand. They need to destroy the innocence of the children, especially the young girls, and they have to destroy the sense of shame. It's all part of the destruction of the culture in general, because we talk about things as a gentleman. As a man, I talk about things in front of a lady. I would have had my face slapped when I was a little kid. I mean, used to be, you never told a joke in front of a lady. You never used a foul word. When you were a teenager, the biggest thrill of your life, if a girl would hold your hand walking down the street, that was you made you king of the hill. But they've destroyed that culture. They've destroyed any sense of shame. And it's all part of the culture. And basically the hierarchy is helping destroy the culture because of its negligence and its activity.
Absolutely.
Stephen, if I may, what do you think is actually is contributing to this attitude of the hierarchy actually getting away with what they're doing?
Well, I think there's so much of it, because what I ran into when I was investigating the bishops, I had the Vatican send a priest to see me, Father John Hardin, and ordered me. He was told to do everything he could to convince me to keep my mouth shut. I had information when I had the St. Sebastian's material. I had naked pictures and thousands of emails of homosexual priests. Not one cardinal I approached wanted to see it. wanted to help him clear it up. So I think the big problem is the corruption. It started many years ago. Maybe it started with the communist plot. Who knows? I'm not sure if Bella Dodd knew what she was talking about when she said they infiltrated the seminaries back in the 50s. But either way, they've brought their own kind in, meaning corruption, because the church right now, in my opinion, is $1 billion money laundering corporation. That's all it is. I've worked with the IRS on 2 cases where over $500,000 was stolen by a couple of priests in 2 different parishes. And the bishops don't, the money belongs to the bishop once it goes into the collection plate. Unless they report a crime, it can't be prosecuted, it can't be criminalized. And so it's just one hand is washing the other, and the corruption goes to politics as well. In our own country, the Democratic Party, the hierarchy's in bed with the Democratic Party. We've got so many politicians that claim to be Catholic, but yet support abortion up until birth. And so the corruption is all the way through the culture, all the way through the hierarchy, and God only knows where it started. It's obviously with the devil, but you're not sure what mechanisms were used to bring it into the church. But the church hierarchy now, it needs to be cleaned up, really. It needs to be cleaned out.
Stephen, in terms of the abuse that is happening in the church, secular media often reports it as pedophile priests. The Catholic Church has pedophile priests. Would you agree with that? Or do you think it's more of a homosexual problem, considering that 80% of the victims are male?
Well, I think it's definitely a homosexual problem. And because most of the priests and the victims I dealt with were past puberty, the victims. So they were teenage boys. There were 1 or 2 in my case that I knew about that were prepubescent, but I think it's definitely a homosexual situation. But there are some heterosexuals acting out as well. But you see, it's a way when the seminaries, from the information I've gathered, they're sort of grooming the people as they bring them in. They're corrupting so many of these seminarians. And it's just, like I said, it's all through culture and through the hierarchy right now and through the church. Unfortunately, in this country, I don't think there's a bishop you can trust, because if there was, there's a few bishops speaking out, but none of them are telling us how the money's moved around. They claim to be good bishops, wanting things cleaned up, but they're not telling us what's going on behind the scenes or how it's being done, or they're not answering the questions you're just asking me. And if there was a true bishop out there that was truly a man of God, he would answer those questions so he could help us to help him.
I also find, in terms of bishops being supportive of the laity, I think it's Bishop Strickland. I think he's from Texas. I don't recall exactly where he's from.
Yeah, he's from Texas, Bishop Strickland.
Yes. He often tweets out in support of more traditional Catholics. But even that's quite frustrating, because it seems that that's all he does is tweet. And, everybody cheers. And I believe he's a very good bishop, but still there's nothing really being done. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you completely. They can tell us a few secrets. They can applaud us for being Orthodox. But unless they tell us how to stop the damage, how to end the corruption, who's controlling the hierarchy behind the scenes, who's doing what, how the money's moved around. Here in this country, I recently found a bunch of hidden corporations the bishops had. Well, they weren't really hidden, but people didn't know they existed. And it's sort of a self-insurance plan, but there's much more to it than that. And they've bought a $9 million building in Omaha, and they've already got a $60 million building in Washington, D.C. So one has to wonder if they're men of God, if they're here to promote Christ and his teachings, what is all this money situation going on? And it's the idea of, for example, one abuse of one child, one act of homosexuality should so offend a bishop or a cardinal that he would do everything within his power to stop it and expose it. But now think about this, and I hate to reuse. Everybody talks about the Nazis and the horrible things they did, but the Nazis, the they can't hold a candle to some of the American people. By that I mean, we now have women, Catholic women, demanding the right to kill their unborn children. We now have bishops who wine and dine politicians to promote the murder of the unborn. That is, if you stop and look at it realistically, that is so horrific. For example, if a Cardinal Dolan sits down with a governor of New York who promotes the killing of the unborn, he brought up the worst policy, even after birth, killing the child.
Yes.
With his laws. If you'll sit down and have dinner with somebody like that, that's an endorsement to all the young people out there watching the TV screen. And when people like Cardinal Supich tell individuals at a press conference or during Mass that he would have no problem giving communion to a monogamous homosexual couple, what is that telling our children? A sin that cries to heaven for vengeance, and in a sense, the Cardinal is glorifying it, is justifying it. Well, people have to look at the bigger picture, and it's really very simple. It's the little things they do. These so-called men of God who represent the apostles, they're closer to Judas than Peter. I mean, when you stop and look at it. And because what they're doing, they're taking sins that cry to heaven for vengeance, sodomy and abortion, killing of innocent individuals, the most innocent, in the most horrific fashion. But I tell folks, you got to remember, Mary, the perfect victim of Planned Parenthood. And when she visited her cousin Elizabeth, Christ leapt in the womb. I mean, so when you put all this together, I look at things differently because I've seen so much, I've heard so much. I see things differently than most people do. But it's so horrific, the fact that we can talk about abortion and sodomy like it's nothing.
Like it's nothing.
It's when I was a child, you didn't mention homosexuality. You didn't talk about it. It was so disgusting. You darn sure didn't talk about it in front of a lady. And that's how the culture has changed. Of course, I'm older than you guys are. This was in the 60s when I was a young man growing up. And people just have to take a different look at it because the hierarchy has failed us completely. Even the so-called good ones aren't good ones. No.
It's true even for us of our generation. I mean, it wasn't spoken of when I was a young child, and because of the way the culture is now, I've been forced to speak to my young children about it because I know that they're going to be confronted with it when they go to school and when they watch the TV, So I've been forced to educate them at quite a young age about these things that they shouldn't even know about.
That's what's a shame of it, because the minute a child gets into the school system or gets on a school bus with the current curriculum, their innocence is destroyed.
Absolutely.
That was the defense for the young girl, was her innocence and shame. There's no sense of shame anymore.
Absolutely.
They take that away from the children at a very young age. And like I said, as a teenage boy just coming into manhood, the biggest thrill would if a young girl would hold your hand. Of course, we didn't have DVDs, we didn't have the internet back then, but just to have a young lady hold your hand, mom was everything. I mean, dad ran the family, but mom really did, but dad didn't know it. And that's the way it always was. And when I was there was no family without mom. There's no children without mom, even a nurse, even a teacher. I mean, us young boys all fell in love with our grade school teachers. It was a mother figure in them, but it was a sense of purity and innocence. And that's all been destroyed, thanks to the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, because none of this could have happened had the bishops done their job. None of the culture could not have corrupted to this point. There used to be a decency code in this country up until the late 60s where the Catholic Church made sure of it. All your TV shows, your TV, programs, mom and dad had two separate beds. Look at Father Knows Best. And if you saw a woman in a brassiere, it was on a mannequin. So you didn't excite little young boys or give them something to think about. I shouldn't even say that possibly. But nowadays, look what you've got on regular TV. You've got so many shows depicting homosexuality as normal and, the positive thing. And the bishops, whining and dining these pro-abortion politicians. That's so disgusting. If every bishop stood up and told, and the Pope especially, with a public stance, and told these politicians who promote abortion that they're on a path that leads straight to hell and eternal damnation, they could soon start them to think, even if they're halfway gone, lost, because someone's got to speak up from the hierarchy. And since they're not, the laity, we have to do our job. And that's what Father John Hardin told me. Unless the laity does something, one diocese after another is going to be lost. And we're getting down to the end. But the good Lord will win. We know we'll win in the end, but it's just a matter of we've got to do our part in the meantime.
And I think we need to do more. Sorry, Mel, go ahead.
Now, I just wanted to just to touch on two things. The first thing is, we know that with the kind of work that you do, there's I'm sure there's a whole lot of persecution. Can you tell us more of what you faced, maybe what your family's been through in these past, I think it's about 20 years, going on 30 years?
It's 25 years. Actually, my wife actually hated what I was doing at first because no Catholics would speak to us. They thought I was awful because I would dare shame the church. And I told them, how on earth? As a young man, my father taught me a certain way of life. And you don't mess with the children, you don't mess with wives. And if you don't fear God, you darn sure better fear me. That's the way he taught me to grow up. And when you see this stuff going on, but these fellow Catholics, just keep your mouth shut and be quiet. That's what they wanted to say. I said, young boys and girls are being abused. And they would have nothing to say to that. And so the most Catholic, when I started in the 90s, most Catholic organizations wanted nothing to do with me. The only one, the first one that got a hold of it was Father Paul Marks of Human Life International. May he rest in peace. And I was out to his new residence and he come in to speak in Springfield. And he propped me up and he told me, he said, Steve, you're doing the right thing. And he put me on the right path. Then Father John Hardin contacted me, then Father Malachi Martin, and a few others. Once I got the clergy behind me, the good ones, telling me, giving me some direction, it worked out. But no, I've had 3 death threats, one the FBI looked into, and the hate. But you know what's funny? My wife has a business, a pizza place, her and the kids run, and we lost about 20% of our business back in the 90s. She did because of what I was saying and what I was doing.
Unbelievable.
But thank God for the Protestants, because the Protestants made up. I was asked to join more Protestant churches, and many of the Protestants really back then were more Catholic than most Catholics. I mean, if you understand what I'm trying to say, because they still believed in marriage, they still believed abortion was wrong, and that sort of thing. And what we were finding in the Catholic Church, it's supposed to be one holy Catholic and apostolic. You could go to 10 different churches, parishes, and find 10 different masses, the way it was said, the abuses that took place. And Dr. William Marr gave a lecture on altar girls, communion in the hand, and extraordinary ministers. And he said they all came about because of sin, and they did. So many bishops and priests were allowing it that finally the Pope allowed it. I don't know what the year was, because so many were defying the rules. They were sinning. They were denying the rules of the church and allowing altar girls, communion in the hand, extraordinary ministers. And you look at it today, and one priest told me, so many people are handing out communion like they're potato chips. That's the way it is. I'm gonna risk stepping on your toes, but I don't want you to think that's what I intend to do, ladies. But really, because I think women can never be equal to a man, because they would have to come down 3 or 4 notches to be equal to a man. The woman is so superior to the man, but she has her place as man has his place.
Absolutely.
The greatest gift God ever gave to anybody, who did he give it to? He gave it to a woman, Mary, the mother of God. And people forget that. So the women need to get out of the sanctuary, let the men be masculine, get rid of this feminism stuff, because feminism has destroyed women. Because women in this society used to be on the top, used to be queen of the day, but now they're treated as equals. They're treated with no respect. Young girls, instead of demanding respect from the young man, they date anybody. And so it's all part of a process that has destroyed culture. And I know I go on sometimes on some of these topics, but I'm very adamant and very concerned because I think women should stop allowing men to not do their job. Women should be women, men should be men. And women, because when I was a kid, to show you the power of a woman, if you wanted to date a young girl, what did you do? You put a belt on, you got a haircut, you got a job, you talked nice to her dad, you showed her respect. Nowadays, that's all gone.
It's all gone.
To earn the friendship, the trust of a woman, you would act like she wanted you to act. Women controlled everything. A man always had to stood up. He supported the family, took care of things. And they said, well, women, oh, you think all we can do is teach or be nurses? I said, I want to tell you something about being a nurse, for one thing, about a woman's role. I was in a hospital October 9th, 2007. They told me I wasn't going to live. I'd fractured my skull front to back in a motorcycle wreck. And the doctor said, everything in my past, evil and vicious, came back to me from my military, from my law enforcement. They said that's why I was threatening to kill everybody. I had such a head injury. And the only thing that would calm me down, they said, was my wife touching my face and talking to me. And meanwhile, they had to tie me down. A female nurse could calm me down. They said, just talking to me or touching my face, let me know she was there. But when it came to any doctors or anything else, it was a head injury. It wasn't me because I don't act that way. But I said, just as a teacher in sixth grade, if you'll allow me to tell you, Mrs. Free, my sixth grade teacher, she called me Blossom and she had to hold my hand because I acted up all the time. When we went out to recess or to lunch, she had to hold my hand. Mrs. Free didn't realize I acted up, so Mrs. Free would hold my hand. We walked out there. So these little things, you laugh, but these children today, they don't understand that. They've lost that. Mm-hmm. They lost the sense of shame and the beauty of marriage, and sexual relations was for marriage. It was never thought about in any other context. And we've lost all that. We've lost everything, and we've lost everything that Christ taught us. Not everything, but it's still there. But I'm pushing it back little by little.
Are you still Catholic? Are you still in the church?
Oh, I'm a hardcore Catholic. They hate to see me because I'm the guy at Mass that gets up and tell the all ushers to shut up. You're making too much noise. Yeah. We're talking during Mass, or that sort of thing. When you've got women with tattoos running around with the collection plate, that bothers me. I mean, I got nothing. They want to get a tattoo, that's their business. But don't have them show them while you're serving at Mass where you shouldn't be. Let the men do your job. And I don't want to offend you, ladies, because I'm saying you're much better than men. But I'm thinking let make men do their jobs, because women have more control than they realize, but they're giving it up.
Now, I think Kim and I have had this discussion as well. And we were both actually very active in our ministries within our parishes until we bumped our heads and we realized the error of our ways. So it's not a foreign discussion to us, and we're glad we came to that realization. So yeah, no, I agree.
I'm glad to hear that, ladies, because I wouldn't want to offend you. And like I said, and that's when I first came up with a speech on feminism, I went into a tavern to try it out, where there's a bunch of men and women. And I figured if I can do it here, it'll go over good. And the first thing I told the ladies was, ladies, you're never going to be equal to a man, never. And the ladies got mad and the men started to smile. And I told the men, I said, don't smile yet. I said, you know why she can never be equal to a man? Because she'd have to come down 3 or 4 notches. A woman is so much higher up than a man. And then I brought into the Mary example and those sort of things. And they begin to understand, but they're not told that anymore. And the bishop is failing them miserably, because religion class used to always be a nun that would teach you religion class.
Yes.
Or the priest when I was growing up. And the greatest gift, if the nun or the priest would give you a religious card with a saint on it, you had something. You really thought that was cool. And nowadays, they just the kids today don't know what that is. Most kids, Catholic kids, don't know what the rosary is.
Mm.
The teachers in Catholic schools sometimes are not even Catholic anymore. So
Yes,
never mind
and
that.
you've got some of these RCIA programs bringing in Catholics, and they're bringing them in halfway. They don't even teach them what mortal sin is, and they don't know what the rosary is. They don't know what a devotion is to the Blessed Mother. And
Even ourselves, Mel and I, we often talk about when we completed our catechism as teenagers, we knew nothing. We are self-catechized, through the internet, only coming to realize how woefully misled we were. We knew nothing, It
I
was
was
no big deal.
I was fortunate because when I got out of the military, when I got out of the army before I met my wife, a priest got a hold of me in a town, Petersburg, where I live now, and he even barred me from communion, made me mad. But when I understood why when he explained to me why he said I could know, he stopped me, denied me communion, but he knew I wasn't prepared like I should be in a state of grace, and I didn't know. I was falling away. I wasn't that good, and I realized later he loved me more than anybody. He told me the truth,
There you go.
and he once told me, we were talking about a situation, and he said, Stephen, some people you can't talk to, and all they understand is this. And he held up his fist. And I thought, boy, this guy's all right. And so, we need those kind of priests again, men's men. And the nun really devoted in the habit. Now you've got nuns with fancier earrings and perfume and jewelry. And I don't begrudge anybody, fixing themselves up like that. But they used to be so respected, and religious orders was so, but everything is falling apart, in society in general. So we all know that, but we just have to each way do our part. But going into a tavern now and then and giving my speech on feminism, you'd be surprised how many lives you turn around just by putting the thought in people's heads. And how many men leave the tavern with their girlfriend or their wife pulling them out by the ear after I get done talking. And it's they just need to hear it from everybody thinks if you believe in Jesus, you're a wimp, or you're nothing. And I remind them that David killed Goliath and then cut his head off with his own sword. I said, so Christ whipped the money changers out of the temple. So, I mean, being a good Christian, believing in Christ, doesn't mean you turn the other cheek all the time. There's times you stand up and fight. And
you can't be a doormat.
No.
That's what we have to explain to our children, too. And my father taught me that when it comes to his family, because nobody messed with his wife or kids. And that's the way it should be. And
that's
men,
lacking, I think, a lot in today's society.
There needs to be more family structure. They've destroyed the family structure with this transgender nonsense and these gay marriage things. They're destroying the family, and they're doing the most damage to women. So I think women, these feminists, if they really knew what they were losing and giving up, if you could get them fighting for our side, think what could be done. I mean, look what the homosexual has done with just gaining the press and gaining the power of the press. Look what the feminist movement has done. If Catholic women could stand up like that, and believe me, if every teenage girl in this country demanded respect from every teenage boy before she would even hold his hand and was demanded the respect she deserved, it would change the world. I mean, really, in a sense, it's just like Christ was born of a teenage girl and she saved the world in a sense. Today, the teenage girl can save the world again because she doesn't realize the control she has over men. Every man wants the affection, wants the friendship of a young lady sooner or later, wants to get married. And the woman has that control. Demand respect, demand innocence, a sense of shame, and I think the rest will follow. Like my dad always said, my grandmother told me, she said, any good woman can completely control her husband while she makes him think he runs the world. And it's the truth. And
Yes.
it's the way things should be. I mean, really, because women and men each have their own place. And but anyway, I'm sorry, I get off on that
No,
subject.
no, we love listening to you. I do want to ask you, you mentioned homosexuality being shown on the TV, and in the culture, and it's everywhere you look. And it's not only that, if we tell our children the truth about homosexuality, we're then labeled as bigots or hateful. This whole love is love thing that's pushed. It's like they've taken love, like you mentioned just now, the priest that stopped you from taking the Eucharist, that was love. But their sense of love is distorted. They've got a false sense of what love is. You're obviously familiar with Father James Martin.
Yes, and his
Um,
the,
yes,
the harm he's doing. And you're absolutely right, because their idea of love is just telling everybody what they want to hear. But
what they want to hear. That's right.
a Benedictine once said, it's not an act of charity to allow your neighbor to run headlong into hell. So it's not love. But you see, you can't believe in the true sense of love if you don't believe in hell, if you don't believe in judgment, if you don't believe in the 10 Commandments. Because true love is to wish them well and do them good, as a priest told me, to keep them on the right path. But if you don't believe you can go to hell for committing sins, for violating the 10 Commandments, then you don't know what true love is. Because true love, it is just that, keeping someone on the right path. And to wish
As
them well.
Father Altman says, true love involves true hate.
Absolutely, yes. And there's so much, and I think we've got more men. What's sad? I have more women backing me up and helping me than I do men, tenfold. And if the men, I said publicly many times, give me 10 men in any diocese and we'll take it back. I said, I'll show you the method, I'll show you the plan. It won't be easy, but I want 10 men who are willing to stand up. And we'll do it with.
How do we get these men? How do we get them?
Well, I think you ladies are not doing your job, because the women aren't women. I'm present company except, I'm sorry, I don't mean to say you ladies, but I mean, there's a lot of women that aren't women, and there's a lot of men that are more feminists than they are men.
That's right.
And they're not manly men. They're not standing up because it's not demanded of them. And I think the young ladies need to start demanding respect. And in that sense, they'll mold the man. He may not know it, but he'll act like he needs to act to gain their affection, gain their attention. And if they demand that he prays every night, if they demand that he says grace before a meal, if the woman demands that he dress properly and show respect to other women, he'll do it. Believe me, he'll do it. But there's too many young ladies, and I hate to put it off on the ladies, because the men have failed, because the ultimate responsibility, no matter what happens in a family, it falls on the man. Even if his wife did it on a rare occasion, it's because he let it happen. So men have to get back to that point. They have to realize it's their job to do the best they can with their daughters, but it's the mother that has to instill that sense of femininity, true femininity, true sense of shame and beauty. I told my kids, there's nothing more beautiful than at Mass than a woman with a long dress and a veil. And that is so pretty, and so elegant and so pure. And it means so much. But young people have lost sight of that today. And again, you ask me a question, I get off on a tangent. I apologize for that. But I'm so adamant and I'm so solid in what I believe. And it's just.
You're absolutely right.
But
you're absolutely right. It actually does take a woman to raise a man. That's what I believe.
well, you don't want to tell every man that, but in the long run, the men got a rule. And I tell my girls, never shame your husband in public.
No.
Never contradict him in public. Let him be a man when he needs to be a man. It's in my family. I've got 5 siblings, and my father's dead, but my mother's still here at 90. I'm never Nobody ever wants me around unless they need something. If they need something, they know I'll do it, or they know I'll stand up. So let the men be the men, but demand it. But if you want to cause a problem, do it at home privately, and but never shame a man in public. That's the big one comes in. But
Well,
when
Kim
I,
and I can give you 2 men each.
Sorry, Mel.
I'm saying Kim and I can give you 2 men each.
Oh,
For a
yes.
start. Yeah.
I wanted to go back to, you said that your biggest supporters are women.
yeah, those that actually get involved, women that came and helped me stuff envelopes, work in the office, do bookkeeping. There's been
But
a few good.
on the other hand, don't you find that the women that it's mainly women protecting these priests, these abusive priests? Don't you also find they have a lot of women protecting them?
When you get into the churches, it's always women that are running everything.
Right.
You're absolutely right, and it's sort of an irony, but it's I near here locally. I don't want to mention any names, but we have women directors that are directing this, directing that at the parish, and even Father doesn't seem to stand up. Many of them are afraid to confront some of these women, but
Yes.
I think they need to be put in his place. We had a priest, Father Switek, may he rest in peace. He's the one that got a hold of me when I got out of the service. He would stop women at the door or men at the door if they came to church in shorts, or women with bare shoulders, or if they talked inside of church, the building. He would stop them, and he would sometimes embarrass them, not intentionally, but it just came along with the action. But we need more priests to stand up like that. When's the last time you heard a priest talk about dress code at the church? What my priest always told me, you don't have to have a beautiful gown, but wear your best. Now he said, now you have somebody come to church, come to mass in shorts and blue jeans and a tank top, and Father would say, if you took your wife out on an anniversary dinner, would you dress like that?
That's so true.
How much more important is Christ? So we have to start with the little things in the parish, and we need to start by working on the priest. And that's where a woman comes in too, because every priest has a mother, and women have a powerful impact, on even the priest, because they can say things that a man can't say to a priest. And I had a woman that was helping me, Mary McGrath. She's dead now, may she rest in peace. But she once told a priest one time who was rushing through mass, she said, Father, if you don't slow down, you're going to go to hell. Now, only she could get away with that. But what I'm saying is, women, here's where the power of women come in, because have the mother figure as that natural inborn instinct, and every man knows, every woman knows, you can talk to a priest easier than a man can. I mean, it has to be careful because of his celibate lifestyle and everything. I'm not talking about, getting too flirtatious or anything like that, but just talking as a mother, as a sister, as an aunt, and you would have a great impact, because I've learned that tied down to hospital beds and in the classroom, the effect a female has. She just a certain tenderness, a certain way about her. So I think the priests have to start preaching the truth. But there again, a lot of times the bishops, the corrupt bishops, stop them from telling the truth. When's the last time you heard a sermon on hell, on birth control that can send you to hell? Abortion is murder. I mean, it'll get a little lip service now and then, but it never gets a really passionate, statement about how awful and evil. I mean, how many millions of children have we killed in our country here in the United States?
You can't even bear thinking about it. I mean,
in a most horrific fashion. So we have to get back on that and have the priests do their job. And
it seems we're lacking though in priests. And another thing I wanted to ask you, just going backwards a bit, about the priests in the, when they're still in formation, when they're in seminary. Have you found through your research that this is where it all starts? Are they sort of being groomed? Or do they enter the seminary knowing that, not really having a calling or a passion or wanting to preach?
Well, in many cases, from what I'm hearing, They're weeding out Orthodox young men from the seminaries. They're only taking in the effeminate or the homosexual types. There are a few homosexual men that get in. There are a few good seminaries where there might be a few good instructors, but still, the seminaries are the starting point for a big problem. And if you get a strong young man, a Christ man filled with Christ, who gets his way through, he's persecuted at every end. And, he's fighting an uphill fight and many times a losing battle, because if you get a bad priest, these bishops will tell you, well, we got to follow canon law. We can't just remove him because he's a homosexual or because he stole some money. But you get an Orthodox priest who speaks out against homosexuality, like happened in Chicago, and the bishop throws him out without any canonical process, without any due process. So
That's it.
they use their power how it suits their needs. And they're not, the fact that a victim of abuse has to have a lawyer to find justice shows there's no truth in the hierarchy right now. Any individual, any bishop who finds out a priest acts on his homosexuality, for the love of that priest, he should throw him out of the priesthood right now and get him some help, because he sins so greatly by doing that. If the bishop loved his priest, he would pull him out of the priesthood, not to put him in that situation anymore. And the same thing with the abuse of a child. If it happens once, that's enough. And for the sake of that priest, as well as the child, he should have been thrown out. But you see him moving him around. Now they have these bishops' conference in 2002. Was a big conference here in the United States in Dallas, Texas, where the bishops got together, all 300-400 of them, and decided what to do about child abuse. So I've been in audience, I've given lectures before, and I asked every man in there, I said, every man in here, somebody abuses your child, do you need to have a meeting with 400 people to decide what to do? No, you don't need a meeting. These bishops know what to do, just like every father would know what to do if somebody hurt his wife or hurt his child. You wouldn't have to go hold a meeting with the whole town council to figure out what to do about it. It's just a ploy to deflect from the real responsibility these bishops have in some of this abuse that's going on. But as awful, as satanic as this abuse is, so many more souls are being lost by the faith not being taught. And the scandal is being brought. When a parent teaches a child something, say I'm a high school graduate, I quit college to go serve my country in the military. So all these priests and people that were speaking out against me, they had 10 years more education than I did, some of them. And my young child will look at them and they'll say, well, your father doesn't know what he's talking about. So it's just like a priest. He has such a damning effect, even contradicting parents, even if he's telling a lie, because of his stature in life. So it is so dangerous when these priests, these bishops, these teachers get off on the wrong course with these children. And it's got to start with the children, but it's got to work its way up through the family, and the family structure needs to be restored. And we've got to clean up the hierarchy, period. We've got to have the bishops stand up and say, here's what's been going on. Here's where the money's going. They need to tell us everything that's been going on behind the scenes, because we need to go back to sackcloth and ashes, get rid of their mansions, get rid of their fine trips and their Bermuda vacations and their luxurious meals, their drivers, put them back in an old beat up car, driving from parish to parish, take away all their fancy benefits and their salaries. We have no idea how many millions of dollars are being squirreled away by bishops and members of the hierarchy for their retirement. We have no idea.
It's outrageous.
They're living like kings, yeah. They're living off the widow's mite, and that makes it even worse. They're taking money from these people, and I hate to say little old lady because I'm a little old man, but I'm not little is the problem. But I'm getting up there in age. But so I shouldn't use the term little old lady, but you take these little old ladies that give their last nickel and dime to the church because they want to help Christ and the priest. And if they knew Well, God knows, but if they knew what their money was being used for,
It's
they're
sickening.
harder. Yeah, that's what's so disgusting. So we need to get back to the basics, and in the simplest form. This is easy to understand, but we don't need to overthink it. Just keep it down to the basics. No sense of shame, no sense of right or wrong, no sense of sin. And these men of God aren't men of God. They don't act like Christ. They don't act like a representative of Christ until they start doing that.
There are clearly more of these homo predator priests coming through the ranks as we speak in the seminaries.
Oh, they're just more careful now. They're abusing each other and other adult men. They're staying away from children a little more. I think just for financial reasons, because they're out now, they're exposed. Before, I found one diocese, I'm not going to tell you where even the law enforcement, well, we just when it come out that the child was big, we'll let the bishop handle it. Even they didn't do their job. But now it's out more, and it's out in the public's eye, and it's talked about because nobody would ever talk about it before. Now they're a little more cautious, in my opinion. I think it's in their relationships, they're getting more. It's just like, I think it was Cardinal Supich that made the comment, some of these relationships are consensual. Talk about homosexual relationships and clergy. It's still a sin that cries to heaven for vengeance.
They think they're so tone deaf. It's unbelievable.
Well, it shows you can't believe in God. And I've said this on a public radio station in Chicago about Cardinal Supich. I said you can't believe in God and give communion to a Jewish mayor or a Lutheran governor or active homosexual couples. That's a sacrilege. That's an offense to God. You can't believe in God. You can't believe in the Catholicism and do something like that. You can't believe in sin. You can't love your fellow man. So all those things come into play, and that's what we have to make clear, I think, each in our own way. So,
and how can laity help? And how does what do we do? What do we do?
well, I think we've got to cut off the money for one thing, and stop giving the money. That's hard because even my wife has a hard time,
A lot
with
of people, yeah, have a hard time with that.
cutting the money off. But still, but I think that we've got to say something. We've got to speak out to fellow Catholics and make the point, because I found what I've accomplished by the grace of God. Let's not forget that, only by the grace of God, because I'm a nobody. I'm a nothing. I'm not educated, but I'm a father. I'm a parent. I'm a grandparent. And now, thanks to some good priests, I know my faith. But what I have accomplished by the grace of God, if I'd have 20 people working with me, it could have been that much more. I mean, you look at the St. Sebastian's Angels material. That went worldwide.
Appalling.
I had no idea. I begged every cardinal I could contact in this country. I didn't want to go public. Do something with this. None of them wanted it. Cardinal George, when he was still alive, said, well, I won't look at it because it may be an occasion of sin. I said, how the heck do you hear confessions? How do you do anything? And so that's when we went public. And we all know what happened. It helped expose the corruption. But I actually felt sorry for some of the clergy involved, because I read thousands of emails homosexual priests were sharing with one another. And that sort of gives you an insight into their world, which is very painful, very enlightening, but very painful, because some of these individuals in the homosexual lifestyle, they're victims themselves, and drug into it, or forced into it, or raped into it. So there's so much damage being done, and all because the hierarchy is not doing their job. And Christ will not be mocked. So we just have to do our part, until that day comes, and leave the rest in the good Lord's hand. Do our part. Just speak to people, get the public active, even if it starts at a local school level, to straighten the school up. But I always said, if they'd let me in a college to speak on feminism, I would love to speak to all the young ladies on feminism, because A Polish priest years ago, back in the 90s, I met in Chicago, in Frankowski, he said, reach out to the young people, Stephen. Give them something to fight for. You know, young people now are fighting for Black Lives Matters and Antifa. Give them something to fight for, something good, something holy, something true. And I believe if you can reach the young ladies and explain what a real woman is and feminism, and I'm working on a lecture on that series, and give them something to fight for, because they can control every man out there,
That's
whether
very
whether they realize it or not, because every man wants to eventually get married. Some don't, but still they've got a mother, they've got an aunt, they've got a sister, they've got a waitress, they've got people that have effect on their lives. But if we can reach the young ladies, show them what they're missing, let them know how much important they are. And it starts with the fact that the greatest gift ever given to anybody was given to a woman, a teenage woman, Mary. So what does God think of the young lady? I mean, that's how important she is. She's the mother of all life. And if we approach it from that way and start there, I think the ladies will take care of the men. Make them be men again. You know, make them stand up for what, make them defend their honor, you know, what have you, no matter what it takes. I mean, a little fisticuffs never hurt any young man. I'm not talking, you know, when I was a kid, you never shot anybody, you never did anything like that, but you didn't respect a lady in the family. You could talk about a guy's brother, his dad, his uncle, but you didn't talk about a lady in the family. Even if he was mad at his sister, hated his mother at the moment, you didn't talk ill of a female in the family. It's got to go back to that.
that respect. It's not there anymore. Eh?
It's truth. And then once the family is put back together and the church is part of that family, everything will come together, I do think. But it will do our part, and the good Lord will take care of it in his time. And by the grace of God, if everybody works at it in their own little way.
Now, Stephen.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. You know, with I'm not going to imply anything. I'm just putting this out there. With all the cover-ups that go on, as the laity, we sit here and we wonder how far does it actually go. And not so long ago, I watched the documentary with Sister Kathy Sesnick and Joseph Maskell back in Baltimore at Keogh High School, and it scared the living daylights out of me to think that murder would be committed and the church would continue to cover this up.
Yeah.
Have you experienced anything of this kind?
Yes. In part with the murder of Father Kuntz and a few others. He was working with me at the time. I had to prove, I was interrogated by the detectives for 4 hours on that case. Father Hardin felt surely it was church connected. But you see, evil, the devil has his way. And, he has no boundaries. Now, what you see on the surface, if the true identity of these bishops and the hierarchy that were corrupt came out, they would be known for what they are, corrupt and evil. So they've got to be a facade. And I'm not saying every bishop, but I'm saying it's clear just in what's in history now, what's been in the papers. I mean, they've got to put on a face. But what goes on behind the scenes, I mean, is just so sinister. And so, I mean, there's been children. I can't get into too many details, but there's been a lot of children that have lost their lives. I mean, I helped a group that was part of a orphanage out on the East Coast of the United States. Throwaway Child was the book they wrote about it, about some children that were killed and persecuted. And there was nuns involved, nuns and priests. But I mean, the stuff that goes on, I mean, just look at what happened back in the day in England when they shipped Irish kids out and they sent troubled unwed mothers. They took their children away. They sent some of these off to Australia and that sort of thing. There's all sorts of in past history, especially Catholics, and people don't realize how bad the Irish Catholics were treated, and especially about the English. So what you're talking about, the murder, and unfortunately that does go on, but stop for a minute and think. That goes on every day in abortion. The most horrific type of murder, the most offensive to God. And we talk about it. We all do. In passing, like it's, hand me a cup of coffee. You know what I'm saying? It's not to trivialize what you're talking about, but I'm just saying it's so horrific. Cutting, I've helped with or been present for the delivery of 7 children. So I cannot imagine. And I shouldn't say this, maybe I saw my children before my wife saw my children.
Yes.
But anyway, it's just the idea that somebody could murder that child. It's just beyond my belief. I just can't understand it. So, but when you think about that goes on every single day and is promoted, what can't they justify?
Exactly.
It's like all these mass shootings of all these teenage kids. When you teach them that a mother, the most purest soul there is on earth, Mary, the mother of God, but when a mother, with the respect of law, can kill her own child anytime she wants. These children, these young children growing up in bad homes, what can they think about the value of human life?
Nothing.
When a mother, and I shouldn't pick on the mother, but I mean, she gives birth, she gives life, but I mean, it's more men that are running it, but it's a feminist movement that's pushing it. But when you take it down to its bare bones, simplest form, the most horrific type of evil and murder is going on right now within the church. I mean, some of this stuff is church sanctioned. I mean, there's bishops and there's priests that don't have too much of a problem with abortion. Well, look at the support that Joe Biden is getting, a Catholic president, so-called Catholic president, from some of the hierarchy. They're afraid to even criticize him. And look what this man is doing. Maybe he's a puppet for somebody else, but look what he's doing. He's undoing everything Trump did to defend life and take money away from Planned Parenthood. This Catholic president is now undoing. So
sometimes it feels like we're in a alternate reality with the church. When you see these things and you see the Pope and the bishops and you see them doing everything that is against what we've been taught by the church, it's difficult, and people become so confused. It's actually a confusing time to be a Catholic.
Well, who can believe? I mean, now look at it that way. Who can believe in the Catholic faith? Look at it. I mean, look at the joke the hierarchy presents. And I mean, but they have to be shown the true faith. And that's where we come in as the laity. And however we do it in our own way, whatever situation arises. But we just need to take it back to its simplest basic forms because, I mean, I don't know. It's, there's a lot of things I know and I've seen I can't really talk about publicly. It would be too offensive and wrong, and it wouldn't be prudent, but it's much worse than you can imagine. And
we can imagine quite bad things. So if it's worse than that, good grief.
Well, look at the scandal. The biggest thing in my mind is the destruction of the child, the destruction of the innocence of the children. And because when you rob their sense of innocence, their sense of shame at a young age, you've stolen their whole life from them.
You've destroyed them.
Look how marriage used to be so beautiful and so pure and so, it was prophetic, something to look forward to. It was so special, so sacred, so saintly, but now it's just something in passing. Gays marriage, transsexuals marriage, you get married 6 times. It means nothing anymore. Marriage means nothing. There's more kids born out of wedlock than in wedlock. So I mean, And that happens to everybody. I'm not condemning people that make the mistake or something like that, but I'm just saying, as a society, and because of the hierarchy, this could not happen without the hierarchy, without their lack of action or their inaction or their direct action.
Mothers of homosexual sons, in particular, I feel like they don't want to accept that their sort of son's behavior might be condemning them to hell. So they'd rather change God's word than take God's word and try to change their child. Do you find that as well?
I'm going to tell you something I've never said before. I'm only going to say it because my wife said it when she gave a speech in Chicago a couple of years ago. We've got one child that's turned to the homosexual lifestyle. Our oldest, not our oldest son, but one of our sons. And we couldn't understand why. And we couldn't we've made it clear he won't talk to us. We made it clear to him we love him, but he will not come around with his friends. You know, he's welcome, but no one else is. He knows the Catholic. This kid went to Catholic high school and defended the faith. And we couldn't understand why. And my wife and her devotion to the Blessed Mother is constant for our children. Anyway, I recently found out my son, who will have nothing to do with me because of my fight against corruption in the Catholic hierarchy, sent him to a Catholic college, the only one we did. He was a chaplain for the ROTC before all this happened. And he recently did a video, and I found out he was sexually assaulted while in college. And he mentioned it. He mentioned it on a video he did on YouTube. He never spoke to me about it. So what I'm saying is, this happens to a young man. You don't know what it does to him. You know what I mean? Especially a young man if he's never experienced any sexual activity in his life. You know what I mean? So I can talk to this subject just a little bit. It is difficult, believe me, but either you have faith or you don't. Either you trust in God's mercy, because what I tell my wife, if he was drug into it, good Lord will know. You know what I mean? And if he was, and so many of these young people today, if they're outcast in their community because of one thing or another, who accepts them? The homosexual crowd gravitates to them.
They're right there.
They accept them. They're polite to them. They tell them this, they tell them that. And so they befriend them. So it's a corruption. So who's more responsible? You don't know who God will hold accountable. The priest who didn't teach, who didn't stop a situation, the mother who fluffed the pillow of her homosexual son, God forbid, or so you don't know who is the ultimate responsibility, who God will punish the most, or who will be saved. All we have to do is we've got to do our part, and we've got to promote the faith. We've got to trust in God. There's no other way, and have a devotion to the Blessed Mother. Because believe me, I've been on my death. I faced death 3 times. The last time, the doctors told me no way you can live, and I have massive brain hemorrhaging. And it's funny, and I'll tell this story. My wife doesn't like me saying it too much, but when I was tied down to this trauma room table, and I was tied down because I was so violent, my skull was cracked, and I was bleeding and bloody, and they were cleaning me up. All I had left on when they were giving me last rites was my brown scapula, she said. That's the only stitch of clothing I had on, was my brown scapula. The priest was giving me last rites. And, but I tell them, when you've been there and you've been given last rites, all the doctors say, there's no way I could have lived. They don't know how I lived. Only by the grace of God. So you've got to believe, you've got to have faith. And even in the most difficult times, because it's the only way we can survive, especially for a mother. and I know from my wife's experience, it's more difficult for a mother than anybody.
Yes.
I mean, because she gives life, and a woman that carries the child knows better than any man could ever know. My baby just had her first baby. Her and her husband are here right now, and she's down in Florida. She's an accountant, but she had her first baby, and she's our youngest, and she wants a big family. And so you relive sort of all that changing. It's funny to see how the dad acts differently now.
What you would.
He's so protective. But to get to your question, people just has to have faith. Do what you can. Do everything you can. Start out with writing letters to all the clergy, and things will happen. But you just keep moving. Depending on what happens is what you do next. Depending on what one priest says to you. And if you can come out to where you can make a public statement, just make sure it's truthful and make sure it's proper and make a public statement. Hold a public meeting somewhere, put an ad in a newspaper, depending if you get enough people together to raise a few funds. Hold a meeting at a conference hall, at a hotel or something. Make the title of it Catholics Against Feminism or Catholics for the Family. But giving a talk on feminism to a bunch of women, to me, that's the most exciting thing. I hope to get into the college one of these days, because to see the anger and hatred when you start, but at the end of that, you're placing them way above every man. They begin to understand because you give them something they can hold on to, something they know is true deep down inside. And so you just have to approach it how you feel comfortable, but don't feel bad if they hate you. Unfortunately, not everybody is in a situation like I was, because my claim to fame is I didn't care what they thought of me. It hurt my family. They took it hard because my kids were persecuted. But I was not a kind of guy that wanted to be respected in the community. I didn't need to be in all these groups or anything like that. So you've got to consider all that and take that into consideration before
And I think
make
stop being silent. We need to start speaking up and stop the silence.
Yeah, and start out with writing every clergy, every priest in your area, in the diocese, write them a letter, make it a letter that has those points in it about sexual morality and heaven and hell and the responsibility of priests and parents. Compare your responsibility as parents to his responsibility as a priest, and judgment and not doing our job. Put him on the spot. At the same time, you put yourself on the spot as a parent, if you know what I'm saying, in a letter, and see what kind of response you get. Because there's somebody out there that knows something.
Stephen, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you, how can the laity support you? How can we support you?
Well, right now we are fighting a lawsuit, so that would be very, very helpful. And it's an unjust lawsuit, our lawyers pointed out, and we hope he's assured me we'll prevail in the end. But it's a very costly situation for opening your mouth. But our website is www.rcf.org, or you can search Roman Catholic Faithful and you'll find it. And you will take PayPal donations over through the website, or you can send a donation to our post office box. It's Roman Catholic Faithful, P.O. Box 251, Petersburg, Illinois, Petersburg, Illinois 62675. But if they want to send us information as well, or bits of information, and we can hook up with a group like yours, we'll be happy to pass it along to the appropriate people, because you never know what little tidbit of information will lead to something much bigger. And but we always need the financial support, and they can do that through our website, rcf.org. And our address is there as well, but they can also donate through PayPal on that website. We're very appreciative for anything like that. So,
right, Stephen, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Let me know how it goes.
Thank you for your time.
We will. We've enjoyed this. Thank you so much, and we'd love to have you on again sometime.
You've got my email address, so keep in touch. Facebook's got me shut out right now for some reason.
We saw that.
Yeah, they don't like something I'm doing. So anyway, but God bless and good luck with everything you're doing, folks.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Stephen.
Right.
Take care.
God bless you.
Okay, Melissa Kim.